The Good Country Index measures how much each of the 125 countries on the list contribute to the planet and to the human race through their policies and behaviors. Description: the index is a composite statistic of 35 data points which are mostly generated by the United Nations. These data points are combined into a common measure which gives an overall ranking and a ranking in 7 categories such as science and technology, culture, international peace and security, world order, planet and climate, prosperity and equality, health and well-being. The concept and the index itself were developed by Simon Onholt. The index was built by Dr. Robert Govers with support from several other organizations. The 3 top countries in the list published in 2014 are Ireland, Finland and Switzerland. 9 of the top 10 countries in overall rankings are in Western Europe. The last 3 countries on the list ranked Iraq, Libya and Vietnam. Methodology: the index attempts to measure the global impacts of national policies and behaviors, what the country contributes to the global commons and what they take away. The index utilizes 35 data points, 5 in each of 7 categories. These data points are produced by the United Nations and other international agencies and a few by NGOs and other organizations. Countries receive scores on each indicator as a fractional rank relative to all countries for which data are available. The category rankings are based on the mean fractional ranks on the 5 indicators per category. The overall rank is based on the average of the category ranks. This yields a common measure which gives an overall ranking, a ranking in each of the 7 categories, and a balance sheet for each country that shows at a glance how much it contributes to the world and how much it takes away. Categories and indicators equals, science, technology and knowledge, number of foreign students studying in the country relative to GDP, exports of periodicals, scientific journals and newspapers relative to GDP, number of articles published in international journals relative to GDP, number of Nobel Prize winners relative to GDP, number of international patent cooperation treaty applications relative to GDP, culture. Exports of creative goods relative to GDP, exports of creative services relative to GDP, UNESCO dues in arrears as percentage of contribution, number of countries and territories that citizens can enter without a visa, freedom of the press, international peace and security, number of peacekeeping troops sent overseas relative to GDP, dues in arrears to financial contribution to UN peacekeeping missions as percentage of contribution, attributed number of casualties of international organized violence relative to GDP, exports of weapons and ammunition relative to GDP, global cybersecurity index score, world order, percentage of population that gives to charity as proxy for cosmopolitan attitude, number of refugees hosted relative to GDP, number of refugees overseas relative to GDP, population growth rate, number of treaties signed as proxy for diplomatic action and peaceful conflict resolution, planet and climate, national footprint accounts biocapacity reserve. Exports of hazardous waste relative to GDP, organic water pollutant emissions relative to GDP, CO2 emissions relative to GDP, methane plus nitrous oxide plus other greenhouse gas emissions relative to GDP, prosperity and equality, trading across borders, number of aid workers and volunteers sent overseas relative to GDP, fair trade market size relative to GDP, foreign direct investment outflow relative to GDP, development cooperation contributions relative to GDP, health and well-being, amount of wheat tons equivalent food aid shipments relative to GDP, exports of pharmaceuticals relative to GDP, voluntary excess contributions to World Health Organization relative to GDP, humanitarian aid. Contributions relative to GDP, drug seizures relative to GDP. 2014 overall rank. See also: Globalization, Sustainable Development, World Happiness Report. Notes and references. External links: Good Country Index Overall Rankings, Data Sources for Good Country Index, Gurek, John. U.S. trails Belgium in ranking of global good. Seriously? The Fiscal Times. Retrieved July 3, 2014. Wollaston, Victoria. The kindest place on earth? Ireland. The Daily Mail. Retrieved July 3, 2014. Mazars, Amanda Marie and Sky Gould. Life More, Countries International Politics Environment. These 30 countries contribute the most good to the world. Business Insider. Retrieved July 3, 2014. Onholt, Simon. Simon Onholt, which country does the most good for the world? TED Salon Berlin. Retrieved July 3, 2014.